everybody, welcome back to another video from MBMRC. I've had a week with the DJI Mavic Mini now, and I want to go into a couple things with you about it. I'm probably going to break here pretty quickly to some footage that I actually got of it while I was flying with it. I want to mention that it did do very well in the wind. I mentioned in the unboxing clip that I wasn't sure how it would do. Where I was at with it, there was probably close to, I'd say anywhere between 20 to 30 mile an hour gust up where I was, and I didn't have much issue with it. So far, very impressed with the way everything is with it, and we're going to get further into it here, so I'm going to cut away and show you some video I've done with it. Thanks. Alright, I figured this would be a decent clip to go ahead and start the review off with. I was up a pretty good ways here. But what I want to get into is not necessarily specs with this, because you guys can find all that pretty easily. This is done with 2.7K at 60 frames per second, so it's not 4K. The only thing that you're going to be able to view it in on YouTube, I believe, is 1080 is as high as it'll go. But I want to go ahead here. This was a relatively windy day, especially up where I was. Down toward the ground, it was calmer, but we had some planes back there this day even, and it was bumping them around pretty good. I want to say where I was at in the atmosphere, probably close to 25 to 30 mile an hour gust. I wouldn't take it much higher than that. It didn't necessarily struggle, but you could tell it was kind of working excessively to keep the orientation of the input that I was giving it through the transmitter. But there's some pretty good clips here. Gonna go ahead. This is actually me following my brother's truck down to the where we keep our planes for the moment. We're actually building a new building, which is why you guys haven't been getting quite the content as frequently as we would like to, but that's all going to change here. The building should be done relatively soon. So yeah, we're just going to go ahead and get into this. The first thing I'm going to want to get into here is definitely the pros of this thing. I've already mentioned that it's super lightweight and it does well in the wind. Those two typically don't go hand in hand. Any sort of model aviation, RC stuff, lighter weight typically doesn't do that well in the wind, but this thing does. It's worth noting, if you live in an urban area or anything like that, you can fly this thing around parks. I mean, always check with your local laws, but to my understanding, 250 grams is kind of the limit. But it's also worth noting, however, that if you put the prop guards on this, it's going to push it over that 250 gram mark, so you should probably just be a little bit aware of that. But for guys that are just flying this around their local park or something like that, you shouldn't have any issues as long as you're not belligerent about it. And it's very important that we as hobbyists and people that enjoy this hobby stay mindful of that, because every bad story you hear that's somebody being stupid with it, as long as you're not stupid with these things, we shouldn't have any issues. And it's something, unfortunately, that's under attack all the time, and every bad story that comes out, it's just more and more pushing for legislation to vilify this. And unfortunately, it just takes a few bad apples, as the old saying says. So we want to make sure that we stay mindful as a hobby and as a community, that we don't, push the limits of these things, and we don't do anything illegal or stupid with them. So that's important also. Next thing we're going to get into with this is the video quality. It's by no means the $2,000 Mavic. That being said, if you're using this thing just for YouTube, it records in a resolution too high for YouTube to upload in. So if you're using this for YouTube or, just like some family gatherings or weddings or something like that, this thing would be more than perfect for that. And it's at a relatively affordable price point. I believe that it's $300 to $400. I got the Fly More package, so it was around $500. This thing is super nice, and it's got a very good camera on it. I'm actually probably going to be cutting to some still shots they're just raw, as well as this video. This is all raw. None of it's edited in any sort of a way other than, for the video with some transition effects and stuff like that. But it is actually, I cannot describe to you enough that this, as far as the camera goes with this thing, it is a 10 out of 10 for me for my use of it. It is going to be absolutely phenomenal, and it's a little bit quicker than my Phantom 3, which I'm also going to talk about here. Alright, so here we have these still shots I was telling you about. This is just, kind of like some algae on a lake. I believe I actually have 2 shots of that, and then another one of actually the pad that we're building for this building. This is, I believe, 2 weeks ago. But just so you guys kind of get an idea what the raw photos look like, I think that they look good, especially for, just the average hobbyist. It's definitely by no means for a professional photographer, but for the average hobbyist, this thing is going to be awesome. We're going to go ahead and get into range here. I told you I didn't want to get into specs too much with it, but we're going to do a little bit of like real-world specs with it, I guess. This thing will go about 2 miles out. Obviously, it's very important that we keep it within line of sight, and we don't push these things to the limits like I was talking about earlier. But for testing purposes, it'll do about 2 miles without it getting real laggy or choppy. I brought up my Phantom 3 earlier. This does way better video transmission. It doesn't get real super glitchy or laggy, and that's a big selling point to this thing, because to me, I was worried that I was going to end up with another Phantom 3 as far as video transmission goes, since it is a Wi-Fi link. They're not using, their latest and greatest bridge technology with this like they are on the more expensive drones. But I can tell you that the video transmission is much better and improved from like the Phantom 3, so that is something to be mindful as well. Another thing is controllability and ease of use. There's a huge range of people that use these things, all the way down from probably way too young and probably up to a little bit too old. But I want to hit on the fact that they make this as seamlessly and as easy as possible. There's 3 different flight modes. There's sport mode, there's cinematic mode, and I believe that there's another one. It's kind of like an in-between. The sport mode's quicker, but the gimbal, kind of does its own thing, and everything that you're seeing here has been shot in the sport mode, which is smooth enough in itself, but the cinematic mode slows the thing down a bit and gives it a much more smoother appearance in video playback. As far as ease of use goes, it's not going to get any more simple than this. It's extremely easy for almost anyone to use. That being said, I can't hammer on the point enough to be mindful of all the rules, laws, and regulations in your region, your area. And also, it's not a toy. You could seriously hurt somebody or something with this thing pretty good if you wanted to, even though it's lightweight and everything like that. Don't put this thing in the wrong hands, and don't do anything stupid with it. That's the biggest thing, and we'll be able to enjoy this hobby much longer than it's looking like we're going to be able to. This next bit is going to be for cons. Honestly, guys, there are not that many. DJI does not pay us to do this, so it's 100% complete honesty. The only thing I wish is it was a little bit quicker. That's my only huge complaint about it. There was also, I had a little bit of confusion with the charger, but that's only with the Fly More pack, and I'm going to get into that in a separate video. So please do not be afraid to like and subscribe. Drop a comment down below. Any questions, don't be afraid to ask. We love having you guys' input. Thanks a lot. Like and subscribe. See ya.